Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is my first time at the University of Cyprus, so I'm really excited. I want to thank the organizers for really putting a great event together, and I want to thank the speakers before me because actually a lot of the things that they've said, I'm going to actually be repeating, although I've never seen their presentation before. Okay, so if you hear the same thing from 4 different people, you have to start thinking that it's got to be true. Okay. My name is Anastasiou. I am from Cyprus, and I want to talk to you about my experiences working at a startup in Boston, and then I want to kind of pass on some of the lessons, and then just kind of give you some of my thoughts for Cyprus. We've returned to Cyprus in December, so I'm actually kind of getting a fresh perspective on Cyprus. There are things that were not here in 1992. Okay. So my trip begins in 1992. I went to the University of Iowa, studied engineering and physics, did quite well there. I had a great time. And in 96, I graduated, and I had one goal in mind. Okay? And that goal was to go to, get a PhD and then become a professor, teach. Okay? That's what I wanted to do. And while I was there was a couple of things that were happening. I mean, the 96 to 2000 was actually the most, was an exciting time. You had, Yahoo, Google, you had the .com, you had, it was a great time, and everybody's talking about all these different IPOs. And so, the things start turning in our head, and we're talking among ourselves. And then I think that what kind of made a big impact on me was an entrepreneurship class that I took at Princeton University. And in that class, what it was is that you went through a series of case studies. So you would actually study from the beginning to the end how a company was formed and their exit strategy. So, and we did that over and over again, and we discussed it, and it was a great class, and just kind of, it was a lot of us got excited and thought that we could, this could be a career for us, and I kind of put it on the back of my head, and I went back to research because I had to do a lot of work to finish up my PhD. But then in 2001, as I was graduating, I got an offer, which I call an offer I could not refuse, and it was a big idea, and it was with a great group, and I decided to take the plunge. And what the offer was to kind of make a new type of fiber. Okay? And this new type of fiber was going to be something that is going to replace all the old fibers, and it's going to transform telecommunications. Okay, so I don't want to get too much details, but the main crux of it is the light was going to be transmitted through a hollow core. Okay, and it was research done at MIT of making this specialized mirror and then forming this company that is going to create fibers that are going to be all over the place. And they were just building up the team, so I said, I'll go there. So I moved from Princeton to Cambridge, which is right across from Boston. And I started working at this company called OmniGuide, and the company was founded in 2000 by 3 MIT professors and 1 MBA graduate, and then $4 million in seed funding. This money came from, actually this is a small amount of that type of work, but it's enough to get you, hiring some people and getting some lab space and then seeing whether this thing is going to work or not. And so in 2001, the core team is hired, the lab space is built, that's when I joined as well. And so, it was an exciting time, and we worked really hard for a couple of years, but the reality is that we were not getting good results in telecommunications. It was a difficult field to crack in. So the company in 2003 decided to start expanding into, let's try a medical device. Let's try and, instead of building a fiber for telecommunications, let's build a fiber that could be used to do surgeries with, okay? So between 2003 and on, we started moving in parallel, kind of trying to do both things and then really seeing which one is going to go first. And you know, the medical actually won by a long shot, because by 2005 we had, you know, major success. We actually did have a product. So in 2005 we started actually having surgical procedures done with this product, and I'll just briefly describe it. This is the fiber over here. You know, it's a little bit hard to see it. That's me back here. And the fiber goes through an endoscope, and the endoscope goes through a patient. The patient is here. I mean, if he was laying, that's the patient's head. And then it goes, you know, in this particular case, it was a lung case, and it did a tumor removal, and it was a pretty big deal. But then, what essentially the company decided to do is to drop the telecommunications and just become a medical device company. And you know, the rest kind of followed a conventional path of growing the sales force. And you know, in 2006 we hired a VP of sales. Before that, there was no significant sales, just a little bit. You know, demo fibers here, demo fibers there. And the VP of sales built up a big team of sales people. And by 2014, the company had actually completed 100,000 surgical cases. Now, of course, the company, I'm no longer with the company, but the company is not out of the woods yet, because it needs to go to the next phase, which is increasing revenue and becoming profitable. It has revenues to show that you have enough customers, but it's another step to become a company that can have an IPO. So that is the next chapter for them. So when I look back at my experience, I would say that you look at a company like this where you start in one direction and then finding yourself that, wait a second, maybe I can switch. And we did switch from telecom to medical. So but we lost a couple of years, doing that. But yet, we succeeded in actually having a product. And most companies end up not having any product and not selling anything and not having any real customers. So, I call this a success story. And I want to share with you what I think were some of the lessons and that we had. So I just, this is the slide that actually I spend the most time on, because I had to condense 13 years of learning into one slide and five bullet points. I didn't want to have more than that, because then maybe you won't remember any one of them, but hopefully with five, maybe you remember some of them. And I believe that they are very universal, these top 5 reasons. So I will start with the number 1, and I put them in the ranking that I think is of importance, okay? So number 1, we actually had a good team dynamics from day 1. There are cases where you have huge engineering efforts, but you don't understand the market, and then you end up with products that just no one wants, okay? And we actually had that from day 1, and when I look back at all the products that we actually released, there were 2 that I remember that were big failures. I mean, they were big failures because as soon as they were done, they were put into the storage, okay? And both of those were those that this kind of broke down a little bit. You didn't work together very well. But if I looked at on average, I would say that it was a very good dynamic, and in most cases it worked well. And as long as it kept working, we were producing stuff that people wanted to buy, okay? So that's number 1. The second one, which was key, is that when the company was formed, the founder of the company, Joel Fink, became really good friends with the first investor, Ray Data. And Ray Data, if you guys have heard of a company called Analog Devices, he's the founder and he was the former CEO of Analog Devices. So he's a very wealthy man. He's retired from this, working on Analog Devices, and he does this investing. He does this angel investing, and he's interested in building the people up. So what he did is, through our years, he actually provided a lot of support and mentorship for our leadership as they were going through funding rounds with VCs. And because the VCs, VCs means venture capitalists, they can actually be very much business-like and can kind of force you to go into directions that would cause the company to take big risks. And if they succeed, but if you fail, you're done. But Ray Data did not have that interest. He actually wanted to see something coming out of it. So he was a huge key to our success. The third is that, and I think a few people actually said that, almost everybody before me has kind of said this. We did this very well, prototype early and often. And by prototype, so our stuff is mostly hardware. Okay? We had some software running the laser, but our stuff was actually visible, physical things that you could touch. And it was very important for us to actually put together things very quickly and start showing them. So we'll put something quickly together, and then we'd get a surgeon that was a friend and was part of our sort of advisory board to give us quick feedback before we go too far. And then we'll go to the next iteration. You don't want to go investing too much money and then ending up with something that has fundamental flaws that the customer doesn't want, okay? So, and you can do this for anything. You can do this for software as well. We did this for our software for the laser. We would have beta version, and then we'll bring people in, and then bam, bam, bam. We didn't stay too deep before we actually got real feedback from customers, not from us, because we're biased. Sometimes we see things and we think, oh, that works really well, but in reality, it doesn't meet the customer need. So, then the fourth thing is the early success. And I would say that this, in our case, we had the telecom, and then we had the medical. And in the telecom, we didn't have an early success. In the medical field, we actually had, within 2 years, a product. We were not making any money at that point. I mean, I have to be sort of, clear about that. But by success, I mean that there was a finished product. It was very rudimentary. It wasn't user-friendly. That's why you saw me on the picture. You had engineers in the room to make sure that everything was running well. But it was actually used on a patient, and it did its work. Okay? And then we have to actually improve it, and we did that. But early success is actually very important. It builds momentum, it builds up confidence, and it just kind of gets you going. So it's important to, if you're finished with something and it can work, then just, kind of put it out there in a way, It won't hurt you that much. And then the last one is that, this goes back to the startup culture. I mean, we were, I remember a conversation we had with the CEO, and I was in the car with the founder and CEO. That was back in 2002. And it was about purchasing some stuff, and he goes to me, we are a frugal company, okay? We preserve cash. And, that was, it was a culture that came from management all the way down of sort of not spending, additional money that you don't need to spend. That's number one. And number two is as you're coming up with problems, to kind of think about, well, what solution can you come up with what you have? Okay? The company was built, I didn't show you a picture, but it was built on the 3rd floor of a brick building that did not have an elevator. Yet we actually built an entire lab there. How did we do it? Well, we hand carried all of stuff, and then we brought cranes, and we had to actually stop traffic and had police. We had policemen to actually block the traffic so that staff could come in. So, and every time we would have visitors that would say, "Where do you make this stuff?" We make them up there. And they don't believe it because it is, it doesn't look like the kind of place that you make this type of high-tech stuff, but that's what we had. The company is in 1 Kendall Square, which is, a very, very highly desirable area. You don't have much office space. You get what you get, and it kind of, from day one, having this sort of mentality of solving problems is just allowed us to just continuously just plow through things as they come along. So those are my 5 reasons, and now I want to share just a few thoughts for Cyprus. And this is from somebody coming in fresh, so this is what I see. Okay, the elements exist. Okay, so if this was, if you're making a soup, you have the beef and you have the potatoes. Okay, so you have the universities, you have people willing and are educated. I mean, I look at this room; it's amazing. I couldn't believe that on a Friday there's so many people here. There are good problems. You don't have to actually look for global problems. You don't have to look at world problems. You actually have issues in Cyprus that you could get involved in. And there are some sources of funding, okay? So that's number one. The second thing is, well, if you go to Europe, there's even more things in Europe. You have, oops. Okay, so in Europe, you have specialized manufacturing, which is, if you're going to build the type of things that we're building, it would be difficult to do it in Cyprus. You would have to actually go to Europe to get the precision that you need to have. But it's available. Germany is, believe it or not, building stuff in Germany is cheap, and they're doing a good job. Okay. You have additional funding opportunities in Europe, and then you have more than half a billion people that it's your market. So, and then the number 3 is what I would call, and I think it kind of resonates with some of the previous speakers, is kind of take the next steps. And if you're in this room, most likely you kind of have some interest in this type of stuff. So these first few steps are actually fairly inexpensive and fairly easy to take. Okay? You don't have to think about, what about $20 billion and what about this? No. Identify a problem. Okay? So find out something that you're interested and that you think that you might be able to solve. Then form a very small team. Okay, I would say 2 to 3 people. 2 people is actually ideal, I think, at the very early stage. Then go out and get some real data. So, for example, if you're interested in, I don't know, working on winter tourism, okay, which is a big thing. Don't wait for the government. Government is not going to solve that. Okay. Everybody gives numbers. Okay, but if you're going to get involved, you have to go and get the actual numbers. What is the percentage of exactly hotels that have vacancies? You gotta get those things. How many rooms we have? Not just theory, okay? So you have to go out and get real data. And then somehow you gotta write something down, okay? It can't just be, in your head. Yeah, I think it's very difficult if you don't commit to paper what you plan to do. I mean, call it a business plan, call it a grant proposal, whatever it is, put it in writing, okay? And then just go out and talk to some people. Go out and present it. see what you get. I mean, is it getting some interest? But be also open to the fact that what you thought was a really good problem at the beginning, actually might something much better might come up. Okay, so once you're done with step E, maybe go back to step A and just start this loop again. When you do this, it's very easy, and it's obviously it doesn't cost you anything to do. And that's actually how OmniGuide, in a way, was built. We had that MBA graduate. He was graduating from MIT Sloan. He met with this guy who finished up and was going to become a professor at MIT, and said, hey, could we take this research that you have just done and commercialize it? And the two of them worked the ideas down, and then they spoke to Ray Stata as the founder, and they said, yeah, this sounds interesting. But the initial steps were very, very, very easy and very quick to, very, not a huge time commitment to do. So with that, I want to thank you for your time, and